don't ever give up. And that is probably the best advice and most simple advice I can give to anybody.
Yep.
It is always darkest before the dawn, but you should never ever give up, because as long as you live your life with empathy in your heart, resiliency in your spine, and a drive that won't quit, you'll get to where you want to be.
Welcome to today's episode of the Leadbelt Chronicles podcast. I'm your host, John Steffen. If you've not yet done so, hit that subscribe button so that you never miss another episode. Without further ado, let's get started. Hey guys, welcome back here. I'd like to introduce you guys to a brand new guest today. So Chris has spent his first half of his life in the military and the later half of his life in the retail world. So I truly believe he's got a good story to tell, as well as some very inspirational discussions today that we will talk about. So Chris, I'd like to welcome you to the podcast, sorry.
Well, yeah, there's all of your previous guests I absolutely adored because they got a great name.
I know, so. Chris. It's like, I did not plan to do that, but it's kind of funny how it all turned out that way.
I like it.
So what I like to do is I'm trying to change this up a little bit. So I asked you 3 facts that you might be able to share with me.
Sure.
You know, basically 3 things that we pretty much plan to talk about today. Number 1, you have a military background in the U.S. Army. Second, you have 20 years of character development and leadership. And third, which kind of intrigued me the most, I had to actually Google it because I've never heard of it. Says you use the practice of velvet and steel. I think that's really interesting. I don't want to get into that because I want you to explain it, because I really thought that was really interesting. So before we get started, I kind of want to have you really start and tell your background, tell your story, because I know just by talking with you, you haven't always lived in the Leadbelt area.
Right. I was born in Sheboygan, Wisconsin, which is about an hour south of Green Bay.
Okay.
And we'll mention a little bit more about that later. I grew up a big Green Bay Packers fan and still am to this day. Moved to a town called LaPorte, Indiana, which is about an hour outside of Chicago, where we lived up until I was about 10 years old. And then, as unfortunately there are in today's society, there was a divorce, and my mother and I moved to a town called New Buffalo, Michigan, which is just right across the border from Indiana into Michigan. They're still only about an hour outside of Chicago, and that's where I graduated high school from.
Okay.
So that was the early part of my life, and I spent a year studying business law at Western Michigan in Kalamazoo. Realized that wasn't going to be for me. My grandfather was in World War II and kind of always wanted to be a soldier, and that was my next step.
What did you do in the military?
Well, I did the biggest oxymoron there is in the military. I was military intelligence. So I was part of the 502nd Military Intelligence Battalion, part of the 201st Military Intelligence Brigade out of Fort Lewis, Washington. Okay. But I did my basic training right here in Missouri. Fort Lost in the Woods, Fort Leonard Wood, Missouri is where I did my basic training. Then I transferred down to Fort Huachuca, Arizona, and that's where the military in general sends not just people from the Army, but people from a lot of the branches all go down to Fort Huachuca to do their intel training. And we didn't get a chance to talk about it the other day, but I wanted to mention an interesting fact while I was down there. We are all running in formation, as you do when you're training in the military, and our drill sergeant stopped us. And Fort Huachuca now, mind you, is right on the border of Mexico.
Okay.
And so he stopped us and he said, privates, look up. And we looked up and we see this plane that looks like it's flying really slow. And he said, you guys going to believe me if I tell you there's no one flying that? Well, come to find out, the code name of that project was called the Predator. And the Predator is what turned into our modern day drone system. And it started out as, it was between the United States and the DEA. It was going to be monitoring the border between the United States and Mexico for drug trafficking and things of that nature. And someone in the Department of Defense said, well, what the heck, we can weaponize this thing and not send pilots into dangerous situations anymore, and you have your modern day drones. So that was right around 1996. So somewhere between 2006, 2010, you started to see a lot more of these drones showing up on, because we're of course in the middle of the Iraq-Afghanistan conflict, and I'm watching that, and people next to me, or you'd be at an establishment or out to dinner or something, and you'd see something on TV, and you'd hear wow, that's really weird that they have people that, or these planes that no one's flying, and I'm thinking, I saw this stuff back in '96. Yeah. So it really does make you think about how much technology is really out there. But that's where I did my intel training, and then after that I got stationed at Fort Lewis, Washington, and Fort Lewis, Washington is about an hour outside of Seattle. Okay. Beautiful place of the country. If you or anyone hasn't had a chance to go out to the Great Northwest, do it. Mount Rainier is out there. Okay. It's an incredible area. So I was out there for several years. Spent some time in Higashi, Shitoshi, Japan. Did some joint stuff with the Japanese military. Spent some time at the naval base at Monterey, California, because military intelligence isn't just Army. Branches have to work together on things. So that was kind of my first career. And I got out of the Army in 1999. Went into '95 and got out in '99.
You've been a general manager with Menards for how many years now? You've been with Menards now almost 20 years.
I've been with Menards for 20 years now, yes. I just passed my 20-year mark back in September. I have been in some form of management for 19 of those 20 years, and I've been in general management for about 15 of those years. So it's been a minute. Yeah. This has been a very rewarding career path, as the Army was for me.
Yeah. So the question I have is, how did that come about? Like, if you got out of the Army, you said '99. Okay. So how did you go from the Army to Menards? How did that come about?
Well, honestly, my faith had a lot to do with it. Yeah. I believe that everybody should have a foundation, regardless of what that is. My faith is mine. So when I got out of the military, it was due to a medical discharge. If your viewers can see the scar I have on my head, I had a sheet of metal split me open, and then I was discharged in 1999. After I was discharged, I worked odd jobs, but nothing was really coming about, and I fell into some bad practices. I drank too much. I consider myself a recovering alcoholic. Have not had a drop of alcohol in a couple of decades now, but I had struggled with that, and then one day, during this time, got myself into a little bit of trouble with drinking and driving and stuff like that, and I knew something was missing. And after I was released from jail after one of my bad choices, I decided that I was going to just be clean and use these two hands and the wisdom that I had accrued through my time in the military and even before that from my parents, and I was going to make something of myself. Yeah. I was at a point where I was embarrassed. I mean, when you're in a position like military intelligence, and I was planning on making it a 20-year career and doing a green to gold program and going into officer school and things like that, and all that changes when you get an injury like that. So you go into this spiral of bad feelings and depression. You feel like your career's taken from you, things like that, and sometimes you make some bad choices. And I think one of the things that allowed me to get to where I was or where I needed to be was I had to humble myself. And I think that as we talk about during this episode of yours, as we talk about career path and how to get someplace, humility has to be a part of it, because you're going to make mistakes. You're going to slip. You're going to trip. So I did my fair share of that. After I had decided to make some changes, as one would do, you start putting in applications at different places. And in 2003, 4 years after I had been out of the military, I got a phone call to come in and do an interview to be a sales rep at a local home improvement store called Menards. And this was in Mishawaka, Indiana. So that was the first store that I worked at, and I stocked doors and windows and things of that nature. And that was about 20 years ago that I started. And 7 stores and 3 states later, I'm here in Missouri.
That's awesome. So there's been, and that's one of the 3 things I really want to discuss this time is character development, because it seems like you really hit a point in your life where you had a rough time, and honestly, a lot of people could just be like, well, this is it. This is the path I'm going, and they just don't try. But you really have pushed yourself to really, to advance to where you are today, and so that's awesome. And it's taken you some time, but you've built that character development as time went.
Sure.
So.
I think that, and I'd be lying if I said I didn't have those same thoughts that you mentioned about other people, where it's like, well, this is it. I'm just a big loser. I'm never going to get anything out of life. I've made some dumb decisions, and now I don't have a shot. Well, that's one of the great things about this country that I served, was that with a lot of hard work and belief and humility and resiliency, you have to have resiliency, you can strive and you can make of yourself what you want to. You know what the best thing that I learned from that whole experience is, John? The best thing that I learned from that is it's always darkest before the dawn. And that there aren't a whole lot of things I come into contact with in today's world that seem insurmountable. Yeah, they're difficult. Yes, I can struggle with things. We all can struggle with things. But they're not impossible. They may seem like that. I have a manager that I used to work with. His name is Mike, and he would always say, matter of fact, Mike used to work for me at the Farmington Menards, and he would always tell our team members, hey guys, just take a step back. Inch by inch, it's a cinch. Yard by yard, it's hard. So if you're climbing Mount Everest and you're thinking, wow, this is 27,000 feet in the air, and you're thinking about all 27,000 feet while you're at the base of the mountain, you'll never make it there. You'll never make it there. But if you go, you know what? I'm going to go 1,000 feet today.
Yeah.
And then I'm going to, camp out and, sleep and, and then I'll worry about tomorrow. But I'm going to make 1,000 feet today. You keep doing that, and guess what? In a month, you will have scaled Mount Everest.
Yeah.
And that's how that works. It's never... Michael Jordan got cut from his basketball team, and then he started staying after and shooting 300 free throws after every practice, and Michael Jordan then turned into Michael Jordan.
Yeah.
And that's how that works. You promise yourself failure's not an option, and I'm not going to quit. And if you make those 2 promises to yourself, everything else is on the board.
Yeah.
Everything else.
So did you, in that time when you took that position, would you have ever seen yourself in the position you are today? Was it, I feel like you're kind of a type of personality where you strive to do better and you strive to, get the promotion and grow in whatever you're doing.
Sure.
Did you ever feel like one day you'd be the general manager over 150 employees plus?
It didn't start out that way. It didn't start out that way. Each position, I started out as a part-time sales rep. Then I became a full-time sales rep. Then I moved a store and became an assistant front-end manager. Then I became the next level of an assistant front-end manager. Then I became a department manager. Then I became an assistant general manager. Then I became a first assistant general manager. And then I became a head general manager. Every time, every step I was at, I was like, wow, I'm blessed to be here. I am really, really blessed to be here. And I've worked hard, and my hard work has paid off, and I've been benefited because of it. And then you're in that position for a certain amount of time, you master your craft, and you think, you know what, I can do more. I can do more. I can be a bigger help. And it's not completely selfless. You know that a promotion is more money and stuff like that. So you're looking at it from that aspect. But again, that's the inch by inch, it's a cinch. Yard by yard, it's hard. I didn't start as a part-timer and go, oh, how am I getting to get to be a general manager? Do you know how long it took me to go from part-time to head general manager of a store? 9 years. So within about 4 years, I was an assistant general manager from the time that I started, and then I spent about 4 or 5 years as an assistant general manager. because then to take on the job that I have now. Now I've been a general manager of 2 different stores. This one here in Farmington, which we opened in 2016, and then I spent 4 years in Saginaw, Michigan, running that store. But you don't just wake up there. If this is Mount Everest, it took the 9 years to chip away at that. And I think sometimes it's funny in the society that we live in today, the patience isn't there. We kind of live in that, I call it the Burger King world, your way, right away. And there's not the patience to go through what you need to. I cannot tell you how many young, talented people that I have hired that fizzled out after 3 months because they weren't a head department manager after 3 months, so they just thought that either they were a failure or the job was bogus. I'm like, no, guys, this is what's supposed to happen. This is called growth. This is called experience. This is what's supposed to happen. I'm like, who didn't teach you that this was on the horizon? And the problem is I think we're seeing more of that. So I always try to tell people what my story is, because I think if they can see, oh, wow, so he had some struggles. He had some success, and then he had some struggles, and then he had to chip away, and then he got here, and now he's at the peak of his profession. That if they can see that, and they have a flesh and blood representation of that, it can be a good drawing board for them to move forward with. And I'm proud to say there's several people in my management tree over the 20 years and 7 stores that I've been at that are now either assistant general managers or head general managers. And some of those people started out pushing carts in the parking lot.
Yeah.
And now here we are many years later, and they are running their own stores. And I am ecstatic about that. Not because of any need of feeling self-worth for myself. I was able to give someone else the opportunity that I was given.
Yeah.
And then impart upon them, hey, this is how I got here, and now this is how you got here. Now don't ever forget how you got here.
Yeah.
So, and to my knowledge, all the ones that have gone up are still in their positions, and they're doing a good job.
Well, and seeing you said something that was really important to me and that's why I want to start this podcast. We need to remember where we came from to see where we're headed.
Absolutely.
Don't forget where you came from and see how much you've advanced to see where you're headed. And I think that's always important, not only in business, but also in personal development. I feel like that's very important. And that's kind of where I kind of want to transition into the practice of velvet and steel. So all I'm going to say is I just know I've Googled it, and it's really interesting. So kind of just dive into that and tell me more about that.
Well, I'm not sure what Google told you, but I will tell you where I got it from. I got it from my father, who I am blessed to have living with us right now. Him and my stepmom, Janan, have moved up here, and they live with Amy and I. My wife, Amy, we have moved them in with us. And my dad has always been someone who has always imparted the wisdom on me that I needed. He didn't tell me what I wanted to hear. He told me what I needed to hear. And he was the one who taught me about velvet and steel. My dad has run businesses himself, and when I first learned that term, and we'll start with the steel side of it first, and most people can probably guess what this is about. You have to have backbone. You have to be resilient. You have to be able to be strong when you need to be. And I got a lot of that from the Army. I got a ton of that from the Army. Sometimes my wife says a little too much. But then the other side is the velvet, and I do get a lot of that from my wife. She definitely softens my edges. There are times where tough love isn't the answer. And in the business world, quite frankly, in the year 2023, if your default switch is, well, my people are going to do what I tell them to do, or otherwise I'm going to break my foot off, you're not going to last. You're not going to last. Society's getting rid of those guys. You can't run your business today like the foreman at the docks in Baltimore Harbor. You just can't do it like that anymore. It's not 1974. So if you don't mix some velvet in that, and what I would describe as velvet is empathy. You have to go through this life with empathy. It really is important to understand that because, and it's an old saying, but you never know what someone else is going through.
For sure.
It doesn't matter that I'm your boss, and I can't stand that word. I prefer leader. A boss is somebody who just dictates to everybody. A leader is somebody who shows you how and says, hey, I'm in this with you guys, and we are going to get there. Not, I need you to do this because I have to turn in these profit and loss statements. That's a boss. Nobody wants to work for a boss. People want to work for a leader.
For sure.
So you can't be a leader without empathy. You won't get the respect of your troops, whether you're in the military or whether you're in the business world, the service industry. I don't care if you are running a gas station, if you are running a grocery store, if you're running a retail outlet like I do. You have to be able to act with empathy. And here's where that gets difficult, because we're all human beings. If you're the boss of, let's just say, 137 individuals, there are going to be days where they're not thrilled with you because you have to make leadership decisions and it may adversely affect them, and they don't like that, or they don't like you and they badmouth you or something of that nature. You still don't change how you act. You cannot let the world around you dictate who you are. Don't let, and I tell this to my managers all the time. I have about 30 mid-level managers at the store that I run, and I tell them, do not let someone else's mood dictate your day. That's choice. It's a choice to be in a bad mood all day long. It's a choice to let the hot rumor of the day, and you can imagine in a huge store like you see all over the place. Rumors abound everywhere. So you have to be able to operate with a sense of empathy where you don't know what anybody's going through. Now you have to hold them accountable. That's where the steel comes in, resiliency. There's counselings, and then God forbid they could be suspensions. But I've also told my managers, if we have an employee, and we call them team members at Menards, if we have a team member that doesn't make the mark, and they fail as a Menards team member, we had better have made darn sure that it wasn't because we didn't give them the tools they needed to be successful. Because that makes us bad leaders. What's successful in one endeavor is usually successful in all endeavors if you're talking about character traits. Humility, resiliency, empathy, all of that, wherewithal, discipline. It's not easy getting up at 4:30 in the morning several times a week. In fact, a lot of people can't. But you make it a habit and you get better at that. And let's transition that. So I just threw out some of those bullet points. Where else could that work in? Well, that could work good in a marriage. Resiliency. Anybody who's been married long enough will tell you, that's why the vows say in good times and in bad. Because sometimes there's arguments and things don't always work out all peachy keen. And so you have to be able to work through some things. You better have empathy in a marriage. You better have empathy. So those work well. Discipline. Sometimes even in a marriage, things are a choice. Like, I choose to not be upset with you today. Something you said really hurt my feelings, but I'm going to choose not. Transitioning back, you deal with that in the workplace again too. I mean, customer comes in, they're very upset. You didn't personally do anything to hurt them, but they got their box home and they open it up, and the light that they just bought from you is shattered into 1,000 pieces. And then they bring it back to the store and they're spitting fire. And all you are is John. All you are is Chris. They see the blue vest you're wearing and they see red. And again, a training that I've taught over the years is the 3 A's of crisis management. And that is, number one, attention. Pay attention to people. They're upset. I mean, maybe you're not the cause of it, but you darn sure can do something to not make it worse. There's nothing worse than being upset about something and no one's listening. Pay attention to them. Pay attention to them. This one is tough for a lot of people. Apologize. And here's what I've learned. And this is, you asked for bullet points that can transition through all sorts of areas. An apology is not always an admission of guilt as much as it is a statement of this relationship, whether it be personal, occupational, professional, financial. This relationship I have with you means more to me than being right.
Yeah.
And that has saved me in a lot of areas of marriage, let me tell you that. So apology, and right now obviously we're talking about somebody bringing back a damaged product. Ma'am, I am so sorry. That should not have happened. And then the last day, alleviate. Fix their problem for them. I tell you what, I'm going to get you a new one. I'm going to give you a little bit off the price.
Yeah.
You had to spend your gas money to come back here. My team didn't take care of it as much as they should have, and you paid the price for it. So I'm going to give you a brand new one. I'm going to take a little off the price for you, and here's my business card. You have any problems whatsoever, you call me or one of those numbers on the back that go directly to my departments, and we will take care of you.
Yeah.
I think in today's world you will find most people don't demand perfection.
Yeah.
Not this side of the pearly gates, at least. They're not going to demand perfection. What they want is somebody to listen, and they just don't want to go up to somebody and go, and hear them go, well, I don't know, it's not my problem, it's not my department, so maybe ask somebody else.
Yeah.
And a lot of times in customer service, I hate to say it, but that's what you hear.
Yeah.
Now, if you hear it at my store, there's probably going to be somebody getting a talking to afterwards, because I realize that customer service is the thing that people look for. A hammer's going to cost similar prices regardless of where you buy it.
Yeah.
You're going to go the place where you feel like they're going to take care of you.
Yeah, for sure.
And when the customer who can fire your entire store just by deciding to shop someplace else has that kind of power, then customer service better be your top priority.
For sure. Yeah, and that's the biggest thing that gets people coming back. That customer interaction with people. That's why I like shopping at Menards. And I'm not going to name any names, because even in my business that I'm in, I always say the ABC company. I just don't like naming names.
Sure.
So I've shopped at ABC.
ABC is one of our one of our competitors.
Is it really? well, XYZ is that?
There you go. XYZ's fine. Yeah.
There we go. So, I've shopped at XYZ company, and I went in there to find fitting for a faucet or something. Because we've been doing some remodels at our house, and I went to XYZ company. And, I just need a little bit of help with something. I went down the aisle, can't find it. I went over this aisle, couple aisles, went this aisle, can't find anybody at XYZ company. And that's why when I started shopping at Menards, I found that, hey, do you need anything? What can I help you with? And that's huge. And that's why it has brought me back. And I've told you about your plumbing department. I feel like I know those guys. Those guys have helped me out. Every time they see me, they're like, hey, how's that going? Or they'd always laugh, you're back in here again. Those are huge, and that's not just in the retail world. That's in insurance world. That's in any kind of customer interaction business you're in. Just those relationship building skills are important, because that's what brings people back, and that's what brings business back. That's what helps grow business. I think that's huge.
Well, and that's why the most important asset that a company has are its employees, its people, or I should say this, the most influential part of a company is its employees, because those employees, if they're not doing things right, can cause people to shop someplace else.
For sure.
But if those employees are doing it the right way, then like you said, they're going to keep bouncing back like a boomerang effect. They're going to go out the door, they're going to come back. They're going to have reason to.
Well,
people want to buy things from people who they know, from people who they like, from people who they trust.
For sure.
And if you're willing to help them with a problem and say, hey, look, I can't get you all of this back, but I can get it 50% of this back, and I can get you a new one. If they see that you're actually making an effort, because we live in a world where almost no effort is given from time to time. I hate to say it like that, but this is a different time we're living in.
Yeah.
People love the fact that if they're willing to spend their money with you, you are willing to deliver that service.
Yeah.
Which is, I think, the good thing about how I was raised and kind of where I came from and the blue collar world that I grew up in, is that that's how it's supposed to be. I don't need a pat on the back for doing it the right way, and that's that's how most of my team members act. Now, I try to give them pats on the back because I want them to understand how important they are. And that goes to being a leader again, being thankful, having gratitude. I think that's something else. That's another bullet point that we could add to what we were talking about, gratitude.
Yeah.
Gratitude. I'm grateful that I woke up today, that I have a wonderful wife and a house and my dogs and my parents living with me. And the fact that we get to sit here and do this interview, and that I have a job that pays me well and is rewarding, and I get to teach people and help them learn when so many of our fellow citizens don't have that.
For sure.
Gratitude and appreciation is something that is lacking. And what kind of hurts me is I see people who are in, let's just say, even in better financial situations than I am, and they seem less grateful. They're less grateful about what they have. It's really easy. It's really easy to look at the negative. One of the polls that I had read about customer service is, if somebody has a good experience at your store, they'll tell 3 people. You know how many they're going to tell if they had a bad?
10.
8 to 10.
8 to 10, yeah.
Right. And that tells you right off the bat that, and it's sad to say this, human nature is to look at the negative.
Yeah.
Human nature is to look at the negative. So my job when you come into my store is try to take away the negative. Try to take away the negative. I'm going to make my products easy to find. I'm going to try to make sure that they're all priced properly. I'm going to try to make sure that when you get up to the register, you're not getting some horrible surprise. I'm going to make sure that the people who are waiting on you are very helpful. We have these things that we do in my company called secret shops. And they send somebody dressed up in regular clothes into your store to kind of see how you're doing. And a lot of companies do this. It's not something that Menards is being shady or anything. Tons of companies do this. But one of the things you're graded on is, did somebody greet you within the first 3 minutes you walked into their department? And if the answer is no, then we don't get that point. And we shouldn't.
Yeah.
Because I don't want my people to have to wait around, because there's lots of places, like I said, in this whole area where you can go and buy a hammer at.
Yeah.
Run towards them.
Yeah.
Run towards them. And that's what I hope when somebody works for me or works with me, that they learn. That those are the bullet points that you want to impress upon people, is caring about your fellow man and trying to make sure that they're getting helped out, especially in a store that you're receiving a paycheck from.
What is one inspirational quote, or what do you live by that kind of motivates you, that you would kind of want to share with somebody that might be able to use in their life? What drives you?
There are many things that drive me, and I'm thankful to say that I have many things that drive me. One of the quotes that I told you earlier is that the customer can fire you just by deciding to shop someplace else. But one of the quotes that I grew up loving, and it's still an emotional one to hear from this day, and it kind of is indicative of my life, because I've had the peaks and valleys, and I've been at a place where it's not looking good. And I could take a wrong turn and end up in prison for 5 years or worse. There was a famous basketball coach before your time. He coached at North Carolina State. His name was Jim Valvano. And he has the Jimmy V Foundation, which does amazing things every year for cancer research. He died, obviously, of cancer. And when he was giving his speech at the ESPYs, which is the big sports ESPN award show, one of his, the most chilling part of his speech, and you may know what I'm talking about, because it's played over and over and over again, and not just in sports circles. And he's talking to everybody about how this battle of cancer, that he doesn't know if he's going to win the battle, but he's going to win the war. And he said the reason being is because he lives by this principle. And he says, don't give up. Don't ever give up. And that is probably the best advice and most simple advice I can give to anybody.
Yeah.
It is always darkest before the dawn, but you should never, ever give up, because as long as you live your life with empathy in your heart, resiliency in your spine, and a drive that won't quit, you'll get to where you want to be.
For sure.
So,
those some wise words there.
well, that will be the ending quote for you then, because when people ask me how I got to be successful, I tell them I got to be successful because of the wisdom that I accrued. Mm-hmm. I got the wisdom that I accrued through my failures.
Mm-hmm. Sure. Yeah, I mean, you can kind of quote that too, right there. That's a good quote.
Yeah, that is the God's honest truth. You learn a lot more from defeat. I started out this episode talking about Michael Jordan. Mm-hmm. What caused him to become laser focused and do what he ended up doing? What caused him to become Michael Jordan? Mm-hmm. Was it a success? No, he got cut from his team. Mm-hmm. It's always darkest before the dawn.
For sure.
Always.
Well, we'll kind of transition there and kind of end the podcast with, I'll do a little shout out for you. I've noticed you have had several, sports, whether it's basketball or football references, and you actually have your own podcast. So
yes.
Tell us a little bit about that, and we'll kind of end on that.
About a year ago, my wife and I were visiting my parents when they still lived down in Florida. Actually, it's a couple years ago now. And my dad and I were just talking back and forth about the Packers game. And we were laughing and throwing out statistics and stuff like that. And she kind of leaned over to my stepmother and said, he sounds like one of the guys on TV. Mm-hmm. And on our way home, she said, you should really think about maybe doing that because it's something that you love. Mm-hmm. And she's like, even if it's not like a money-making deal, do it. And she said, you're a big Green Bay Packers fan when it comes to pro football, and you're a big Fighting Irish and Notre Dame fan when it comes to college football, neither of which are doing too well this year, but you have those down seasons. She said, why don't you just do a sports podcast? And so at that moment was born Sunship Sports. Mm-hmm. And we are on YouTube, we are on Facebook, we are on Twitter or X, whatever it's called now, TikTok. Mm-hmm. So, and it's just it's a blast. I have fun doing it, and we usually drop at least one, if not 2 or 3 episodes a week, depending on how busy of a week in sports it is. Yeah. Which I'm able to do that outside of the hours that I'm at the store. Still enjoying doing the home improvement thing. So, but yeah, that is definitely a hobby of mine, a joy of mine, and I appreciate the plug.
Yeah. And so what's it called? It's
called Sunship Sports, SON, Sunship Sports. Okay. And like I said, you can find it on Facebook, you can find it on TikTok. YouTube is pretty much our home. That's where I drop all my videos. And then I've even got some articles up so people can look at those as well.
Awesome. Well, Chris, I really do appreciate you coming out. I know you have a busy schedule. I know you work a lot of hours throughout the week. And definitely I really appreciate you coming out. You have a lot of wisdom, I believe, and I feel like we just kind of hit the top of the iceberg with it today. But Chris, I really appreciate you coming out. Thank you for taking the time and talking with me. Other than that, if you guys have any suggestions, any input, whatever it might be, just go ahead and send me an email. That's actually how you got a hold of me, which I appreciate that. Actually,
right.
Your wife got a hold of me.
Yes, she did.
She was the one that sent it on your behalf, which is
correct.
Kind of cool. That's how this all came about. So, but yeah, if you are interested in being on the podcast, or if you have any suggestions or questions about it, send me an email, and I'd like to talk with you. But other than that, I will see you guys next time.
Thank you.
Hey, Chris.